invention of fire.
Yeah,
It's not just the internet, it's fire. And depending on how you use it, it's better information access so that you can make better decisions. And that is a major unlock when we're looking at pattern recognition or predicting or adding personalization, or if your processes are not necessarily set. What happens to that is that then AI just magnifies those challenges.
yeah,
The idea and the notion of the human in the loop. Like, are you the person who's saying, okay, I'm going to look at everything, I'm going to be the orchestrator? Or are you the human on the loop of, I'm just going to look at these, I will verify before send. And then there's human out of the loop, which is where then we start to approach agentic, where we're allowing the AI workloads and the AI agent that so that they also have some incredible red teaming
okay,
pieces, which are really helpful for when you're dealing with chatbots or anything that is generative. Of how can I make sure that my bot is staying on the rails and
yeah,
it's staying within its remit? Because unfortunately, humans are going to human, and at times they're going to try to make things do things they shouldn't.
yeah. How do you even get started with them, like for that information access?
Turn that into an ebook that basically contains that framework we talked about, that growth blueprint with a little more detail.
Welcome to the AI for Marketing show. I'm your host, ANJLEENA, with many years of experience marketing in the tech industry. This show is for marketers to keep up with the pace of AI. We host conversations with innovative leaders who are navigating the world of AI for marketing. And today, I'm really honored, honestly, Susan, to have you on the show. Susan Westwater is the CEO of Pragmatic Digital. And I attended your show at a summit recently. And really, the thing that struck me the most was how practical and grounded the advice, the frameworks, the case studies that you were presenting. And I'm really honored that you're here on the show and you're going to share that great wisdom and learnings, right, like with the audience today as well. So, Susan, with that, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And I'm always honored, actually, quite frankly, when someone attends one of our sessions and they come away and they hear exactly what we want to hear. It reminds me and keeps me in check of that. Yes, we're doing our marketing just as well as we try to help our clients.
Absolutely. And before we start getting into the nitty-gritty of it, maybe if you want to take a minute or two to kind of paint the picture of what Pragmatic is about, what you're focused on there as well. And then I'll just kind of weave it in here as well. Is if you take a step back, what's exciting you the most about the promise of AI for marketing? So maybe we can get started with that.
Sure, sure. So my husband and I founded Pragmatic Digital back in 2017, which now feels like a lifetime. We knew it was early then. We really know it was early, seeing as ChatGPT really changed the forefront of what AI means to folks.
Mhm.
But we have always had an eye towards innovation and the idea towards practical innovation of helping folks to do things better. It's an enhancement. Our vision is we see AI as a partner, and therefore we want to help organizations unlock it, not just from an individual level, but helping them understand it from a team and even an organizational level, and doing it in a way that makes sense for them, and that is very practical. Gone are the days of building robots. There are those who are doing that, but from a practical standpoint, there's a lot that we can accomplish with the technology we have today. And I think that's what is really exciting right now, is as that conversation has changed, um, we have seen that folks and people are now really understanding some of the power and are now starting to ask the questions. The questions have shifted from why would I ever want to do that? It's Skynet, a lot of cynicism, to more of this is, and actually I'm going to borrow this from a colleague of mine, Anne, of this is the invention of fire. Um,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
it's not just the internet, it's fire. And depending on how you use it, you can cook an incredible meal, or you can light your way down a dark path, or you can clear cut a forest or an area so that you can build something more. But you also, at the same time, can need to be careful, because yes, fire can burn.
yeah.
But it's an exciting time right now of that kind of innovation, that kind of disruption, and quite frankly, in the right hands, that kind of empowerment.
Yeah, no, totally. I hear you on that, and I think I may borrow that in my future conversations too, because it surely does feel like that, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, the excitement around it, the nervousness around it, right?
Yes.
All of that and the capabilities, right? Like, is essentially pushing us, right? Like beyond, right? Like anything that we've seen so far. So maybe a little bit about you know AI for marketing, because just a short while ago, even a year, right? It was about Gen AI. It was about
Hmm.
content creation, right? Like that's how we were looking at the possibilities. And now, of course, for marketing, it's way beyond that. And you had actually covered that in your talk. And I would love for you to kind of like paint that 10,000-foot picture of AI is more than just content creation for
Yeah.
marketing.
And that's the exciting thing about it, right? AI is more, I mean, content creation is one of the hardest lifts, especially when you're having to constantly be asked to do more with less. And it's a great place, but we can do things now from a customer experience perspective, where we're using conversational AI to provide 24/7 AI powered support. And by the way, that's at the request of the user. So it could be text based, it could be voice based, it could be web based. And then understanding on how we can deliver better by personalization. We can use process automation, and we can look at predictive analytics. There's all of these things that work together, and when we put them with generative AI, at times
Yeah.
we 10x it. As much as I dislike using terms like 10x, but we can even make that more powerful. There's so many ways that we can use AI also internally, so that if we are with a team in a regulated industry and let's say compliance isn't comfortable
Mm.
with touching customers, we can find ways of basically getting better information access. Um, we like to talk about it in the sense of AI is better information access so that you can make better decisions.
Mm.
And that is a major unlock when we're looking at pattern recognition or prediction or adding personalization. And you can use that everything from top of funnel of, hey, this person's in a consideration set. What is it that they need to know? What is it that's their biggest concerns or their biggest challenges? How do we address those? All the way through, hey, this is someone who's made a purchase. They might be a risk for a churn. They may
Mm.
be a risk that they're not going to renew. How do we make sure that we can recognize those things? And then we can add that layer of content generation of, okay, now let's generate the best copy possible, the best
Mm.
content possible to communicate those things. But it can help us get those insights that just make it so much more powerful that we're not necessarily buckshot, but it also feels a lot more one to one because it's when I say personalization, I think of personalization as not just your name and your account number or what your services are, but what's relevant to you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm just kind of like thinking about all the different categories that you just touched upon, right? So content generation to
Mhm.
predictive to customer experience
Yeah,
to research to analytics to insights, right? Like, I mean, it's touching every single aspect, right? Like of marketing. And I would love to, of course, get into like some of the real tangible, right? Like
yes,
success case studies that you're seeing, because I know you're already, in the trenches, right? Like with some of your clients in some of these industries like healthcare and manufacturing, etc. So I'd love to hear, right? I'm really curious also to hear about those success stories. But before we get into that, maybe I would love for you to take us through the AI growth matrix, because
sure.
when I heard you talk about it last time, I was fascinated by the clarity and the structure, right, and the details that you had provided, right, in terms of like how to think about AI growth. So would love for you to kind of like take us through that growth matrix. Um, yeah.
Sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is one of the things too that we have seen morph over time. Again, we in seeing the initial days and early days, it was can we? And now that we can, and now that we have the technology, the conversations change just a little bit. In the sense of it isn't necessarily, I wish I could build this thing. It's more of not necessarily about do we have the technology? It's more about what problem are we solving? As I like to tell my clients, and as I even like to say on the stage, and I'm sure you heard us say, you know, I'm in the business of AI, but my clients aren't in the business of AI. They might be a CMO who's trying to navigate, as I was talking with someone else, they're trying to navigate how they handle tariffs right now and how that impacts pricing, how they're going to be able to deal with supply chain logistics, how they're going to make sure that they're staffing and having all of those right messages that are out there, what's impacting the customer experience. Oh, and then by the way, in their free time, whatever free time they have, they're supposed to learn about AI. So what's really important to get the most value out of it is to think of it more of from a perspective of not necessarily per se being in the business of AI, but being in the business of growth. And that it's not necessarily about the technology, but it is about making smarter marketing decisions. And how do we enable that? So we like to think of it in four very distinct quadrants because at the end of the day, you start talking, and as we just started riffing earlier about the different types of AI, there is no shortage of places where AI can help and can fit. But the reality is there's a lot that we can do with AI, but how do we get to what we should do with AI for my business, not just genericize that? And then when I start to put my prioritization together, how then is what am I actually going to be able to do? And this helps then set up easier business cases, but it also makes it possible that for those of us who don't have an enterprise level budget and need to be pretty lean with what our pilots, we are making sure that we are aligned with those problems that we're solving, and it's more than just experimentation for experimentation's sake. Yeah. So we created the growth matrix to look at the idea of, is it something that's helping us get business? Is it something that's focused on what's going to need to be done to get new customers or to get new projects, new briefs, new assignments, new engagements? And then we think about, okay, so if we've gotten those things, then we have the idea of delivering excellence. And that is then focused on, well, what is it that I need to do to be able to ensure that whatever I am delivering to that new customer or to that customer, I'm doing in the most efficient but the best way possible. And then what then can enable me to continue to grow that business so that I can continue to grow the business, deepen relationships, retain those clients or retain those customers so that then they continue to purchase, they continue to engage, and potentially even become ambassadors. And that's kind of covers off on the funnel, but then underneath all of it then is we have this notion of running smart. And that's kind of the internal side of it, of what needs to be done to, build, run, and maintain what is that well-oiled machine. So that way then we are able to continue. And that can be things like onboarding. How do I make sure I'm capturing all of the information that might be walking out the door because a long tenured employee on the manufacturing floor is retiring, or because I'm promoting someone and they're not going to be in that role anymore. But what was it that made them amazing is all that unconscious competence. How do I capture that? Or how do I make sure that someone has access to the information they need from HR so that way then they're following policy? So we look at things from that perspective of running smart. Does it help me get business? Does this help me deliver excellence? Is this something that's going to make it so that I'm not compromising quality, but I'm still, again, that horrible mantra that I think folks want to say, I'm going to scream, but doing more with less. How can I be that much more competitive, especially as things become commoditized? And then how do I then find those insights? How do I continue to deliver those personalized, relevant pieces of information that show you're getting my brain, or I care, or that I really do want to foster this relationship and build it and make sure that customer experience is happening consistently across all channels, not just say the one that is closest to me. And so we look through those things with that lens. And if something doesn't fit into that lens, that's a moment to say, is this an experiment for experiment's sake? Is this something that might just be an individual basis? And it gives us pause. It doesn't mean we're going to throw it away, but it definitely means maybe this isn't the priority that I thought it was, or that one person thought through. So we try to use that as a screen that also gives folks ownership. And we also try to keep it in business language because that makes it that much easier when you're trying to sell that into whomever above you is saying, well, what are you doing with AI? What are you doing with this AI project? It feels ownable and approachable because the technology is complex. The technology is amazing. But at the end of the day, we're still solving some fairly approachable business problems when we're doing it right.
So as I was listening to you, Susan, I think it's interesting what you're saying is that yes, AI, like there's this whole hype about AI, and the show is about AI. So we're
Yes.
talking about AI, but it's business first and it's growth
Mhm.
first, right? Like you're running
Yes.
your business, and what exactly are you grappling with for the growth of your business? And that's where your framework kind of fits in, right? Like, which is you start
Mhm.
answering those questions, and then you start mapping the available AI technologies and tools, right? Like whatever is available to that problem. Is that like a fair summarization of?
Yes, yes, yes. And sometimes within there, like when we start getting into it, we might find that and one of our examples is we've had clients where they want AI and they're like, let's run with this. And then we find out as we look and do a quick audit of where things are at because AI should build. It
Yeah,
shouldn't it shouldn't completely like you're not starting from scratch because if you already have a business, there are things that you're getting right
yeah.
whether you like it or yeah, whether you believe it or not, there are things that are working well. Let's not throw those away. Let's augment and make sure that we're building upon that. There are times though that where we'll say, oh, the data isn't ready, and if your data isn't ready, or if your processes are not necessarily set, what happens to that is that then AI just magnifies those challenges,
Yeah.
or as being a little clever, saying so that that crater that you're going to make when you nose dive with
Yeah.
all of this speed is just going to be that much bigger. So let's prevent that. Let's look at these things from that perspective of are we ready for those things? And sometimes we'll find out that AI is ready. Yeah, and AI will solve something, but right now that's actually a 6 month problem. What are we going to do in the near term? Let's make sure that we've got some of those things in place as well.
So I'm just curious also on so if you're in the midst of a project where you've identified, right, like that this is the need and also identified the AI readiness level, so
Mhm.
that now essentially the work to be done is to get them either ready for AI and then you start like attacking their problem, right? And they really have nothing in terms of the systems for lead
Right.
generation, right? Like suppose that's the problem, and you're essentially getting them ready first with the systems,
Yes.
and then you're going to start layering in some of the newer AI tools, etc. Right? That are there. So maybe if you want to take us through, right, like an example or two of such use cases, right, or
Sure.
problem areas that would be really nice to understand, right? Like, how do you approach it from, okay, problem defined, this
Hmm.
is your level, this is what you need to have in place, and then there's a la carte menu of the different AI options out there,
Sure.
right? I'd love to kind of like just walk through an example or two to kind of make it more real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk about get business, right?
Yeah.
Of getting business. So we think of that then as how am I going to acquire smarter? How am I going to, what's my acquisition approach? And so that can be starting with, hey, how lead generation? How am I going to optimize my ad spend? How am I going to use lookalike modeling to help me understand who is actually responding? Who is my customer? It's a very sobering conversation to have if you don't have that persona sorted. And I don't mean the marketing personas per se of like, sassy Sally. It's more of this is the type of user who's going through these things. This is the words they use. These are the problem. These are the organizations they come from. Kind of and saying lookalike modeling of how do I match that and then say, okay, well, let's get more of that. So help me inform then better ad spend. Or if I'm trying to protect my base, but I'm also realizing that, you know what, there's a whole other segment that I can attract. It's again using that type of analytics to help inform. And so we have to set that in of, okay, well, do we already know that about our existing user base? What is a little bit of what's a little bit of the hygiene that we need to do with our data? Those are some of the things we look at. So then we essentially say, all right, well, with lead generation, for example, let's look at some predictive AI tools. And that can be everything from looking at like seamless AI to help me put together the beginnings of a nurture campaign, of being able to use some of the things I already have, like what's my top salesperson doing? How do I then use their content, and use that to target? What pieces of that are the winning formula? And then what else can I tweak and test and learn? And that might be through using Seamless, or we're big fans of Lindy.ai,
Mm.
only because it allows us to put together workflows and agents, that you can either have them, and this is a term, this is a just frame up that a friend of mine, Brett, can say, I will never take credit for someone else's great stuff, but he talks about the idea and the notion of, the human in the loop. Like, are you the person who's saying, okay, I'm going to look at everything, I'm going to be the orchestrator? Or are you the human on the loop of, I'm just going to look at these, I will verify before send.
Mm.
And then there's human out of the loop, which is where then we start to approach agentic, where we're allowing, the AI workflows and the AI agent that we put together, where it learns
Yeah.
where those patterns get, and it updates as it sees what's happening with results and begins to move forward and make those decisions. And maybe I'm not necessarily in that. I personally am a little bit more of a control freak, so I have a tendency to, at a minimum, be the human on the loop. And that's okay, because there are some things, though, that you can feel quite comfortable if you're doing an internal competitive analysis, or an internal,
Yeah.
audit.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Once a week, I want you to go look and see, pull all the offers. If I'm in a restaurant change, pull all the menu items and offers that, my competitors are doing, and then just give that to me. You don't need me to tell you to do that, but you do need me to tell you when to send the report about that to my boss. Things like that. So that's kind of how we think through, like, with from an acquisition perspective. And then that can also include like customer outreach, where then we use conversational AI like chatbots, or SMS, or text and email, assistance for lead nurturing. Again, that's all dependent upon what our audience has said. Yes, this is how I want to engage with you. But those are ways that we can start to look and adding them in.
So actually, I think like there are two distinct pieces here that it would be great to kind of like double click into, right? So
Yeah,
one is, I mean, the phrases that are coming out nowadays are like changing so fast. So definitely human in the loop is something that we're all familiar with now, but you used two other interesting
yes,
ones, the human out of the loop, human on the loop, right? So, and you described them as well. So are these, just confirming, these are like legit phrases that are being
mhm,
used around the industry now? And
yep,
yeah.
yeah. I
Okay.
mean, they're new every day. I mean, I will
Yeah.
say that, but I was, just at a conference on Tuesday, and that was being shared out from that particular company. Actually, does some, agentic workflow development.
Yeah.
They actually, it's called, TELUS
Okay.
Digital, and it's their fuel, IX, and it's lowercase I, capital X. And they have some tools within there that are, I'll be quite honest, and I don't want to sound like a plug, but what was really exciting was to see was that they have their workflows, but they also have some incredible red teaming, uh,
Okay.
pieces, which are really helpful for when you're dealing with chatbots or anything that is generative. Of how can I make sure that my bot is staying on the rails, and
Yeah.
it's staying within its remit. Because let's unfortunately, humans are going to human, and at times they're going to try to make things do things they shouldn't.
Yeah.
How do I ensure that I'm doing that? And they have some incredible approaches of how to automate that,
Okay.
so that it's something you can do much more quickly, but it's also something that's iterative, that's happening in the background, depending on how you're working with it, to then give you a little bit more peace of mind,
Okay.
especially as people talk about hallucinations or errors. This is a way of sort of pressure testing that, throughout the process of creation, but also after launch.
So that's interesting because there are quite a few of these, I don't know what the category is called, but it sounds like it's automation workflows, right? So we
Yep.
had Zapier, the make.com, and then
Mhm.
Relay is actually something that I've personally been using to create some agentic workflows. And it's a lot of fun, actually, right?
Yeah.
So tell us is what you were describing right now.
Mhm.
You used a term again over there, which I didn't quite catch, but I think the general concept that you're describing is that there needs to be an always on guard railing, right? Like
Mhm.
somebody who's always on and checking, right? Like what the agentic workflows are doing.
Yes.
You used a word, I think it was called red something. I don't know what it was.
Red teaming, yeah, it's that it's a so this is a dev term, which is
Okay,
more of a development term or a product software of red teaming of how can I break it?
I see.
And this is a way of a tool that allows you to do that in a way because as someone had once said to me, yeah, it takes a thief to catch a thief, and we're not all thieves. So there are ways that this system from an automated protocol, because that team is really smart. They're not thieves,
I
but they're
see.
very smart. Have come up with ways to be able to identify vulnerabilities. And it can be something as simple as like with what we were playing with in a workshop last week was this notion of what can't you do or what
Yeah,
can't you talk about? Like let's say it's a banking bot. I can't give you financial advice. We all know that. But there are those then who can start to say, well, what if I can make it do that? What if I can catch it in that? So it's really important that those things are doing what they say. And as we get more sophisticated with these experiences, unfortunately, so do the bad actors. So
yeah,
it is nice, and it's a nice way of being able to, again, give you that peace of mind. Of course, again, human on the loop or in the loop will be aware of some of
yeah,
that, but
yeah,
it is helpful to have something that is constantly doing that because when you think about the man hours required
yeah,
or person hours or resources, it's a lot. So
yeah,
therefore, there are more that are coming forward, but it's been really fun to kind of work through that. I think, and that's kind of the challenge too, right? As we start to think about experimentation and pilot of all the moving parts of any of these types of AI applications, it can be overwhelming.
yeah.
And so that's where let's start with some simple, which may not doesn't necessarily be stupid or not very impactful, but simple, impactful, controllable ways that I can pilot to
Mm,
build the trust within an organization or with leadership or even with my audience, my end users. Um, Let me be able to deliver on those promises so that then over time they're able to do that. There was some research I was just hearing about someone's doctoral thesis, and they were saying that we weren't sure how folks would expect um, to be able to interact with, say, a conversational bot. More and more folks are expecting to be able to not be driven down specific avenues or specific. I can do this or I can do that. They enjoy the suggestions that help you put something through its paces or tap into its potential. But the reality is the expectation of that and versus the press one or click I can answer these three things
mhm.
are feeling more and more disappointing as we get more sophisticated. So it is then how do we prepare for that? How do we make sure that we're able to meet our customers where they're at? It's
Mm.
amazing knowing that 5 years ago, not even, we had to say, you can click on this button and talk to it.
Yeah,
And now people are like, no, I expect to have a full conversation now.
yeah.
Um, it's it's an exciting time of where folks are learning a whole new thing. I'm old enough to know when we used to have to teach people, go to this web address and here is this web address.
Hmm.
And even if it was an intuitive, like the brand name, we still had to say there is a website you can go to. Now if someone sees something, the first thing they do is I'll either Google it or you just start to type in, oh, they probably have their web address. That's
Yeah.
how you get to their website. Um, that has to be taught. And that's what we've been doing over the past few years. We now have a customer audience that is now getting mature enough and comfortable enough that then we can actually guide them that way.
Actually, that's interesting. Because I was just thinking about your audiences, I mean, your client base. And again, this is just me remembering from, the talk that we'd had, and also just a little bit from your website. It seems like you're definitely in the manufacturing space and you're also in the healthcare space. And when I think about these two, a couple of, I think, characteristics, right, like jump out. Healthcare, very highly regulated,
Yes.
right? So this thing that you're describing about a conversational marketing experience, like with healthcare, it still challenges
Mhm.
so many norms about like what all can you discuss. So
Yep.
that would be interesting to kind of get your perspective on essentially, the different, I guess, comfort levers, right, that
Sure.
we're seeing in different industries. Now, manufacturing, my experience with manufacturing has been that they are actually laggards in technology adoption typically.
Mhm.
And again, I would love, and these could just be like as just soft questions for you to kind of like
Sure.
maybe educate us on like what exactly is going on, right? Like what you're seeing in these industries as far as their adoption, right? Like of it.
Sure. Sure. So when it comes to say pharmaceutical, it starts to depend on who is our audience. Am I doing provider, am I doing provider education? I'm going to be handling that a little bit differently than say I'm doing disease or condition education to a patient. Is it a matter of providing patient support? How am I trying to inform them or where are they at in their journey? We've seen things, everything from recruitment for clinical trials, of making it easier because there are ways that through either conversational chat or through even some of the other types of tools that are out there, we are able to deliver to them, like we're going to get you the information you need based on the question you're asking.
Mhm.
And some of the things we've even seen are things where it's helping someone even navigate. These are all of my symptoms. I'm trying to deal with my rare disease diagnosis. I'm trying to get, how do I shorten that?
Mhm.
There's actually a group called Rare MD who has been working through figuring out algorithmically and understanding probability. So that way, then they can help someone have a more educated conversation with their physician about testing. And so, again, facilitating and expediting diagnosis,
I see.
just so that way, then they can get to treatment that much earlier
Mm.
and then have a better quality of life. And that's when we are able to start impacting patient outcome. And it's even things like physician care from a standpoint of setting up follow-up appointments. We all
Mm.
know that it's really hard with office staff. Nothing is how do we make sure that we have those? Do we have those tools in place? We do. Do they want to make a phone call? Do they just want to chat? Do they want to use a different type of basis for scheduling a follow-up or even just asking post-op questions? There's examples we've seen of where folks have been able to use AI. You start to understand what they're asking.
Mm.
um, you're hearing your patient, and even if it's the unsaid things of, they're asking about a lot of questions about this. We need to make sure we know what we know, over pattern recognition, this plus this plus this, it starts to get into, are we having a complication? Are we headed towards a complication? Are we heading towards non-compliance? How can we make sure that we're providing that assistance? And again, there are systems that are HIPAA compliant. So that way then we're able to keep that secure. I will say when it comes to like financial services, government, any of those types of things, we always just request as soon as we start talking and having serious conversations, it's please bring legal and compliance into the room. Please bring IT. We're going to have this conversation from the beginning. You're going to be my new best friends,
Yeah.
just as much as either that marketing person who's trying to get that message out, because nothing is worse than getting down a certain path, thinking we have the right solution, and then finding out, hey, here's three new requirements that weren't discussed. What does that do to our timeline? Or what
Right.
is that? What are those constraints? Um, I love constraints. It makes it fun. It makes it an interesting challenge. I might be dangerous to say that out loud
Yeah.
to your viewers, but that is exactly, and listeners, like that's exactly of, let's just get it all documented and understand sort of what are the boundaries and fence
Yeah.
I'm living within. And there's chances are there is something that we can do that is still going to move the needle or improve either delivery of a marketing message or even just overall customer experience, because we have found that, you've been solving this like a champ over here. We can extrapolate from that and we can start to apply that learning and build upon it and deliver and start to, again, with consistency, be able to deliver even better results.
Actually, something you just said struck me because I wasn't thinking about it like that. And that is that even though I started out with like, oh, healthcare is a highly regulated, area, and how do you actually get like a conversational marketing, AI conversational marketing to make any dent in there. But then I think the key that you hit upon was essentially like whatever system is going to be built or leveraged, right? That includes
Mhm.
AI. As long as it's HIPAA compliant, right? Then it's just information in and information out, right? It's just that now instead of talking into, say, like you said, a 1, 2, 3 phone system to
Yep.
choose my options, I'm just talking to another system that can better understand a conversational input, right? So it
Yes.
kind of changed the way I was also thinking about it, that we already have our boundaries and
Yes.
guardrails for the different industries, and now it's just making sure, right, that the AI systems are also respecting those, and are built around those, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the more we know up front, the
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
And sometimes we get to ask new questions that perhaps someone had wanted to ask all along. But let's say it was for the website. We have a lot of knowledge of and experience with websites in general as marketers.
yeah.
So now we're in a position when we start talking about brand new things that, hey, let's ask that question again. Or let's revisit that thing that we've never been able to ask for before because maybe that wasn't a best practice. So we can push a little innovation of, or what's that insight we're seeing as we're connecting maybe two dots that we weren't able to connect before. It is when the most exciting thing for me when it comes to conversational AI is when you can capture verbatims.
Mhm.
And they can be more often, most of the time, it's anonymous. Just for everyone listening. So it's de-identified, but if we hear how someone talks about their problems, if we hear how someone frames a question, that can not just from a sentiment analysis of the tone of their voice or how, but even if they just type it in, or even if we see what they're searching for, those are ways of telling us this is how I think about this problem, or this is how I frame this problem. And then that gives us arms us with a way to then provide that information back to them, the messaging that's going to resonate.
Mhm.
It gives us our cues. I mean, it can be anything as simple as, hey, we just realized that from a senior care perspective, you're looking for a place to put your mom's getting out of the hospital. She needs to be in a care facility, but you call it a nursing home or an old folks home instead of calling it a senior care facility. We already know where that person's mindset is and also perhaps maybe a little bit of their familiarity with that whole world. So then we know, you know what, this person's going to need a little more information, a little more context, as opposed to someone who's like, I need a nursing care facility that can help with cardiac therapy. We know that they've got some words and they know what they're looking for and they have their criteria. That way, then we can start to serve them in a little bit more of an educated consumer perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it, right? Like if we move from the text-based world to a
Yeah.
conversational world, right? Like the dimensions, right, of the get magnified. So absolutely. So you also mentioned something really interesting right now, which caught my attention, which is you said as marketers, we're very familiar with like websites, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's true, right? If we take a step back right now, if you look at all the different channels that we operate in, we've got website, we've got, our email, and then we've got our social media channels. And of course, the events, right? Like the physical events. And these are broadly the categories of the channels that we play in. Who knows what new channels are going to come out now, right? Like
Right.
they might be like robotic something channels, I don't know, right?
That no, I mean, I know, like, well, I mean, there's channels in your car now. There's
Right,
channel,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Like your watch could be a channel,
Mhm.
and who knows, right? I mean, which is kind of interesting. This watch thing. I didn't think about the watch being such an important thing, but I recently heard a parent use, and I'm digressing a little bit here, but it's an
That's all
interesting
right.
story,
That's
which
what
is
happens. That's conversation. Yes.
yeah, which they actually said that they were able to get their kid to agree to certain things because they said you have to put this watch on and sleep at night because I need to see you have at least 4 hours of deep sleep every day or
Oh,
every night.
wow.
And that was interesting. Like I've not heard about it being used, as a parenting tactic. But anyway, so back to the traditional channels as of now.
Sure.
I'm curious, like in the breadth of work that you are doing across so many clients, and they're all probably in different stages of maturity. as far
Sure.
as AI adoption also goes, right? Like, which are the ones, right? Like the ones that are essentially either the low-hanging fruit, or they're the ones that you're seeing that are coming up over and over again in terms of impact as well, right? So
Sure.
if you want to just highlight like one or two where you're seeing your clients gravitate to most, and what are the trends, right? In terms of like maybe it's even shifting from what it was 6 months
Yeah.
ago and what it's now.
The one thing we hear a lot about is when we, again, talking about that predictive side of things and information access. It's really important. Um, there are, most organizations have a lot of their data in different silos or different platforms. Could be Salesforce, could be Tableau, could be Power BI, it could be your Zapier or your CRM systems. How do we get those to talk to each other? So what we've been able to look at, a lot of the requests we have, and this is just internal, of helping with how do I get access to that data? How do I get access so I can just, and instead of having to remember, okay, this is the login I have to use, and I have to ask it this way, but by just simply being saying, like, let's say in a hospital system, how many beds are open, were open over the weekend? Or how at capacity, what was the percentage of that we're going into post-op or we're outpatient? How much, what was the percentage of even a simple trend of what were the sales numbers for XYZ locations of my retail store over the weekend? How much is the heat wave impacting them? Or versus a year ago, what is that trend analysis? And just asking it instead of having to think about, okay, can I get this? Can I get that?
Mm.
Having to be able to actually just ask it, that's been a huge one. And then when you can put a generative analytical layer over it, it's then what are some insights that come from that that I might not know to ask? Be my assistant a little bit, be my research assistant, be my analyst assistant. And that's, I want to be clear, that is not because they don't want to hire, like, oh, I'm taking someone's job. It's we can't afford that level
Mm.
of a PhD uh, data analyst. We
Mm.
don't have someone that we don't have the headcount. We don't have the money to be able to do that. So what can help me along so I'm making a better decision? That's a lot of what we hear a lot about is help me make a better decision. So is that sales data? Is it trend data? How do I take this amass? Because no one's a stranger, I don't think at this point, to big data, but it's like, how can I make it applicable data
Yeah.
or relevant data? So how can I ask these questions of it? Because I'm not going to ask this question and then look at a chart and then be done. There'll be more questions I have. How can I engage? How can I get interactive? And then on the other side, from a customer perspective, it's how can I get the help I need when I want it in the way I want it? And so again, that is sometimes where generative is helpful because as we can look at language patterns, we're able to give things a just language in general. Can I help enable someone to be able to? There's pieces of my content that are really important to me that I don't want them to use their own proprietary, or if they want to use Google Translate or something to hear in language, I want to make sure I'm prepared because there might be a nuance when I go from, say, English to Polish or from English to Japanese or English to Spanish. I want to make sure that I've got that framed correctly. We have that ability to do that, so I can give that richer experience, but also say I care about you because I'm going to speak to you in the language that you prefer. And that's especially in the United States, that's a really important factor. And then obviously up in Canada, you have at a minimum, English and French. How do I make sure then again that I'm being compliant with law, but I'm also delivering things the way I should be? So we're able to make those richer experiences. Those are some of the trends that we're seeing a lot of that part. So when folks talk about being AI first, it's that thought of how do I solve this with AI? The challenge that comes with that, because we had web first, mobile first, whatever first, there's all those trends. The challenge that comes with that is we still need to be customer first or audience first,
Yeah.
and or user first, because sometimes it's not a customer who I'm helping. I'm just making it so that an agent who is talking to someone has the access to the information. So
Yeah.
that way, then again, I'm delivering a better experience because I know, oh, you know what, you ordered a cell phone at our store. It hasn't arrived yet. you're calling me 4 days later and we said it would be there in 3 days, I have a probability of understanding of probably what you're looking for and being more prepared to have some of that information. So that way, again, making someone feel valued and therefore giving them that better experience of where they feel valued and seen.
So very, very useful, actually, right? Because, and I think it ties back to where you started with that AI is not just for the sake of AI, it's to solve a certain problem,
Yeah.
right? Like, what are you trying to do? And also that you need to have like the data, right? Like, and the systems ready for you to
Yes.
even do anything with AI. And I think you went right back to it in terms of like the first and the most important use case that folks are clamoring for is information access, right?
Yes.
So just to double click a little bit into that, for someone or for a company that is basically doing AI in little bit of scattered bursts here and there, all the different departments are kind of looking at maybe their processes and their operations and seeing how they can get more efficient, perhaps, right? Like maybe that's how they're adopting. So suffice it to say that their own expertise in terms
Mhm.
of AI engineers or ML engineers is not there, right?
Right.
So in that particular instance, and if you get a client like that, like how do you even get started with them, like for that
Mhm.
information access thing? Like, is it building out all the data plumbing so that all the data talks to each other and then you can start making sense of it and then you start building AI agents on top of that? Or is it, and I'm just throwing this out there because I've also I know that like whether if you're a Databricks or a Snowflake customer, for example, right, like they're already providing or they're moving in the direction where they can start
Mhm.
providing the data unification and the talk to the data kind of solution.
Yes.
But those might be enterprise level solutions, right? And
Mhm.
they may not be, they may be out of reach, right? Like for some of the medium sized businesses. So I guess the question really is, how does one get started to achieve this information access,
Sure.
use case with AI, essentially?
Sure. I mean, amazingly enough, like if you have a CRM platform, something like along the lines of like HubSpot's already rolling things out, all Zapier is. It's not so much as the challenge of something new. It's what do you have today? We like to start with where are you at right now? And then we do some education because our ideal audience is someone who isn't necessarily, let me just throw money at this problem, come back later. It's That's not something we enjoy. We enjoy working with someone so that they feel the ownership, A, because that makes it easier for them to defend it. And B, it also makes it easier for them to be able to control, to know what it is, and they aren't necessarily, our engagements don't last forever, and we want them to succeed. So you have to understand those particular things. So as we go along, we do work in the education of what it is they need to know. And therefore, like machine learning, we let them know enough to know, understand the risks, the understanding of what they're putting in, understanding security, understanding the importance of that. And sometimes we will counsel if they have not even thought through per se, like they're saying, we want to have a couple teams work this. We start to look at things like AI task force or council.
Mhm.
What is your AI policy? What is your data policy, quite frankly? Because data policies have a tendency to get a bit musty and dusty. So let's look at what you're doing with those things, and then let's set those foundations. So that way, then again, we're moving forward intentionally.
Mhm.
What's the reality? Because what kind of happens is a lot of times it'll be, I want to understand attribution better. All right, well, let's see what type of attribution you already have.
Yeah.
What are you tapping into the potential? Are you using things? Sometimes we had a client who was thinking, do we need to re-platform? Do we need to move from one, to be quite honest, one big tech platform to another big tech platform?
Mhm.
And the answer was, after we looked at it, was, to be honest, at first, their issue was not the platform.
Yeah.
Their issue was their process and data normalization. So
Mhm.
they didn't need to re-platform at all. We needed to look at ways of how do we normalize your data? How do we make sure that we're making it easier for you to deduplicate? And so we do cross into that world of, is it automation? Is it AI? Is it just a fancy algorithm?
Yeah.
Um, I'll be honest, I just want to do the thing that will do the most. So That even comes down to like models of, oh my gosh, 4.0's out. Yes, but you don't need 4.0 for
Yeah.
you don't need OpenAI and ChatGPT 4.0. You've actually been able to do this with 3. That's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. Um, and it's not that it's like I need the smallest, but it's also we have so much technology that already can do things that we don't need to necessarily always wait for the newest thing.
Yeah.
Um, and let's look at what we have, because that way, then if I'm not putting all the resources into renewing or replatforming, all right, where should those resources go?
Mm.
Let's use them a little more. Let's with the scalpel. I have a tendency to kind of treat budgets like my own, client budgets like my own budget, having been in those roles.
Yeah.
So at some point, I know that that particular client is going to be asked, like, by one of whoever signed off on it, why did you do that?
Yeah.
So the more we can arm them with those words, the more comfortable they are, and also the more likely they will be to encourage their team to use it. Because throughout all of this, as we're talking, and these all sound wonderful, if we don't have, say, a great strategy and a purpose for why we did this, it doesn't matter. I could have the most amazing tools, amazing models in the world, but if we're not using it for the right reason, or we don't have a clear vision of what success looks like, it, we will probably never achieve that.
Yeah.
The other side of that too is I can have all these magnificent tools, but if no one uses them, that's also pointless. I just heard about a company where the head of IT says, I'm paying for 6,000 licenses on Copilot,
Wow.
and 100 of them are active. It is killing me.
Yeah.
And that's, again, so okay, so then maybe in that case, we wouldn't get too sophisticated.
Yeah.
We would say, all right, let's get everyone moving from the idea of where we go from a mindset shift of, I'm not using that. Why would I use that? I can do it just as well myself or better. And getting them to try it out. And even if it is like, okay, I'll start with generative, and maybe I'll have it write a few emails for me, or maybe I'll have it assist me with a competitive, or going down a path of trying to help me with some inputs, write a better project brief or assignment brief for the agency I work with. How do I help them understand how to use it that way? Because then they start to, after experimentation, they start to explore. And then when they explore, that's when they're like, how do I get that? Ooh, wait, couldn't I ask this? Or
Yeah.
couldn't I ask it to take these 5 documents? And I can ask those 5 documents questions with research, and give me the insights that would have taken me 10 hours of reading each one of these documents. Of course, always go back and verify, but we're able to cut down some of that work so that it's the dot connecting that we do. Because that's what humans do really well.
Yeah.
So let's open up the human creativity. And then eventually at that point, then it becomes part of their process.
Yeah.
I know there are those who are of the opinion of it's a whole new way of doing things. But in order to shortcut a process, you kind of need to know how it was working in the first place.
Yeah.
And then you know what's critical and what can't be messed with. And then you also know, you know what, there's a better way. Or I do this thing 3 times a day. How do I automate that? Or and then they get the comfort level to then start to do that. The important thing is that we have to make sure that folks feel comfortable telling someone I used AI, again, which is why senior management needs to be on board. Senior management needs to I don't know if it's necessarily a mandate, but you need a policy and you need permission.
Yeah.
And even if you say, well, we kind of, every time someone says, everyone should know they can use that, we then read 4 articles about AI slop, right? People complain about that on LinkedIn. I know you're using AI because you use M dashes, right? All those little tells, those are all things that sort of make someone feel like, oh, you're being lazy. You're not being lazy. You're using a tool that's available. But we have to keep reinforcing that. And then also say, I think one of the best things I heard actually was, I'm not disappointed you used AI. I'm disappointed you didn't proofread it. I'm just as I would be disappointed I'm not disappointed you use spell check, you didn't use spell check, right?
Yeah.
I want you should be looking at what is quality work, not necessarily. And if this is a tool that helps you get there, let's enable that with the appropriate guardrails for security, et cetera. But by having that training and giving that messaging and giving those folks an opportunity to socialize and show what they're getting out of it, they'll probably, one, they'll feel more comfortable using it. Two, I bet they'll find new use cases
Yeah.
that you or I didn't even think of because they are in that particular role. And then we can start to identify what's actually scalable that benefits the whole organization or benefits the team, as opposed to just at the individual contributor level. But that's a whole process that takes a bit of time. But it's all about the mindset shift. So it is people, process, technology, and that's why.
So I mean, I'm listening to you and I know that you're just kind of like touching on the surface of this, but this is like your reality in the sense that you're working across so many different organizations. And I feel like,
Yeah.
and I'm serious about it, I think like there needs to be an episode, right? Like just on AI adoption or like
Oh,
what's
for sure.
actually happening inside companies, right? Because I feel like on the outside, the few of us, right, like who are kind of like in that thought leadership
Yeah.
spotlight, right? Like we're kind of like learning up everything. We're talking to different people and stuff. But those in the company who are heads down doing their job, right? Like how are they feeling about
Yes.
AI? I mean, there's like a mix of nervousness and fear and FOMO, right? And
Yes.
all that stuff mixed in there. But yeah, but I would love, Susan, like for us to really just kind of talk about this topic
Sure.
in detail on the variety that you're seeing, and then also the
Yeah.
success cases where you're actually prescribing, right, a certain
Sure.
recipe for how to have your organization turn I don't know, into a cultural trait, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a learning organization. It's an innovative organization. Teams that say we've always done it this way,
Yeah,
you we've got to start with a mindset shift and some openness. And then it is then helping them feel like it is safe and you're not training a bot to replace you. You're training a bot, you're training a system to help you. So
yeah,
that way then you're working down that path. We have, I have many a colleague where I've heard stories of folks who, they work that much later. There's the one person who's figured it out and said, okay, I have permission to use Copilot. I have permission to use ChatGPT and the enterprise. I'm using an enterprise, and that just means it's a business version. Um, I'm able to use that. I am then able to get through my work that much faster. So then I'm starting to get work-life balance. And one of the things that I've seen a recurring theme just in general is save time, but don't use then the time you save to do more work.
yeah, yeah,
Use that to get to get your work-life balance in place.
yeah,
Because that is something that culturally in the US, we still have to figure out
yeah, yeah,
because of that competitive nature that keeps us, feeling like we're doing things.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are so many facets.
So many facets of that, and I think but it's a very important conversation, and I think like a lot of people would be interested in actually getting inside the mind of organizations, right? Like what
Oh, for
exactly is
sure.
going on the other side, and what is the AI literacy looking like, right? And the
Yeah.
adoption looking like, because all we hear like here and there, like on LinkedIn, for example, we'll see like examples of CEOs sending out notes and memos basically talking about that, hey, your job is in jeopardy, right? Like if
Right.
not, or whatever. So I think, but that's just like one little, those outlier examples. What's happening in the other organizations that do care about their people and they also care about growth, and how do they balance
Yeah.
both, right? Okay, so I think we've actually had a pretty nice long conversation.
Yes.
It's been great. It really, and I was really looking forward to this. And Susan, I'm a big fan also of your AI for marketers or marketing of the toolkit that you have, right? Like, so I don't know if you want to just say a few words about it, and we can definitely share the links, etc., in the show notes too.
Sure, sure. So what we did was as part of the B2B summit, we realized that we do have folks that say, how do I extract your brain?
Yeah,
And there's we're a boutique by design, therefore we always like to try to help people be a little more educated. I don't know, um, it's just something that's important to me of someone to know what they're buying or know what they're going into. So that framework, we put that into an ebook that basically contains that framework we talked about, that growth blueprint with a little more detail, where we do talk about the marketing specific idea of acquisition engagement, and also, how to run in deliverance of excellence. And we also within there include tools. And
Okay.
there's a range of budgets because we know not everyone has an unending budget. Gosh, I haven't had a client with an unending budget for a very long time.
Okay.
So we have a bit of a range of budgets and just sort of how those tools line up to some of the use cases that might fall within those buckets. A little bit of a discussion about the models, although I'm trying to think, probably has to be updated again because as new models come out, but it's the best of our ability. And again, there's plenty we can do with that. But you can actually get that at bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly /2025 AI marketing toolkit.
Awesome.
And that link will take you to where you can fill out a form. That's just so that we know where things are coming from. We promise not to be spammy. And then you can download the PDF with that information. And if you want, you can even schedule a clarity call. We do like a little call if there's questions or things.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm myself looking forward to digging into it.
Oh,
Um,
great.
and especially I know like things are changing so fast and you're keeping it current. So that's amazing, right?
We
Uh,
try. We try.
yeah, I mean it's crazy. It's things are really moving at an unprecedented rate, right? Like you need a full-time job just to kind of like stay up with like everything that's happening.
You do. You
Yeah.
do. But I say to everyone, take a deep breath. You will do as best as you can. You are right where you were supposed to be.
Yeah.
As long as you keep moving forward.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Awesome. So it's really been a pleasure. It's really gone by really fast, and I think you've shared a lot of nuggets today. Once I go back and kind of like start making sense of it, I'll start distilling it out as well. But it's really been a very fruitful conversation and very informative conversation as well. So thank you so much, Susan, for
Well, thank you. Yeah.
yeah, thanks.